So, I'm thinking that by being a little more chatty, I can actually help you to focus on the important parts of what I'm saying. Now, I mentioned already in a previous video that I'm presenting in these presentations, in this series, a set of interlocking perspectives and predictions. And this time I have made more notes, and you might just hear them rustle. So I thought it will help you if you know that that just might happen. Now, I'm aiming to make these presentations in a sequence that is a reasonably rational sequence. And I was thinking, if I had grasped only what I've presented in my first 3 videos, and then I saw a presentation on the nature of good and evil, I might wish to ask, what reason do I have to care about the nature of good and evil? So, I want to get to the answer to that, and I want to get to that answer in another presentation, not even in this one. But before I answer that, I estimate that what I need to do is present the prediction on which I would base the answer to that. So that is what this presentation is for. However, here's where the tricky part comes in, because, as I said, these perspectives and these predictions do interlock. So what I'm going to do now is present you with a definition of a good person, and I'm going to present you with that. I'm not covering why this would be a rational definition of good person, or why I would do it in this specific way. I'll instead come back to that after presenting a perspective on the nature of good and evil, which will be in a separate video, maybe 2 or 3 presentations from now. So, let me present you with what I estimate is the best rational definition of a good person. Now, what I would expect is, let's imagine that there was a most widely accepted standard of ethics. In other words, 1 billion or more people that actually signed up to a minimum ethic, and all of those people were willing to comply with that ethic, and they were willing to follow through with their agreement to comply, and also if they had in some way failed to comply, they would be willing after the fact to compensate the injured party for their failure to, their neglect to, or whatever happened that resulted in them not complying with that minimum standard of ethics. They would be willing to offer compensation for that. So those are my key points about a good person. I'd like you to keep that definition in mind when you listen through to the next part of what I'll have to say. And then what I'll do is, in a future presentation, I'll circle back to the definition of good and evil and how we can look at that, and then perhaps it'll make more sense what I mean when I say a good person. So, I'll use this term, good people, in this presentation now, and I want you to follow, get my point about what I mean when I'm saying that. Now, I've chosen in this 4th video of this series to explain some of the insights I've come across in the area of prediction. Now, the first insight, before I get into that, let me just mention again, I'm just digressing again to say how it can be distracting when I mention, as I'm going to do a few times now, mention the names of people. Typically people that you know, and you will already have some idea about these people, and then you can easily just get distracted from the point of what I'm saying, which would happen even if I was another person presenting something completely different. I mention somebody's name, and then, it's off into a whole different thing. Your mind wanders off. Really, I want you to kind of focus, okay? So the first insight was inspired by something I read in a novel by Isaac Asimov. This author wrote in the novel about statistics being used for prediction. And, one can grasp, obviously, statistics are used by insurance companies, for example. They are used to predict things in aggregate And those predictions are very useful, and statistical methods can be used to do prediction in aggregate. And so he was onto something, and in the novel, this author digressed, and he indulged in a fantasy in which statistical prediction methods could actually be refined to the point where they could predict something very specific, some specific event, future event, historical future occurrence could be predicted in this. Ironically, in the same novel, the prediction was that there was going to be, a whole political scene with diplomacy amongst political figures in this future where people had colonized other planets and that kind of thing. The other interesting little prediction that's not relevant to this presentation, but just interesting, is they had, in this series of novels, they had people who were able to condense, or possibly even just computer programs or robots that were able to condense diplomatic language from a volume of politenesses and diplomatic wordings into something simple like, hey, get lost, we're not going to do your plan. And that's interesting that although he talked about prediction and how it could be done so well, possibly, he predicted a future with basically politicians and political actions and basically no change from current political structures. Anyway, this idea of predicting into the future was reawakened when I came across the book Engines of Creation by K. Eric Drexler. Now, a concept that he introduced there that I hadn't come across before, perhaps he didn't, perhaps he was, again, this is a distraction. The idea is that the broad sweep of science is done, and now there are only details to fill in. I'll come back to that very shortly. The other concept that he presented in this Engines of Creation is that if good people don't do the research, bad people will. And this is why I thought it would be handy to have a definition that I would use for the concept of good people. Now, even if you have a different definition, perhaps it's not that material to the basic idea. Look, if good people don't do the research, bad people will do it. So, let's just go back to the first idea about the sweep of science and just look at two examples. Two, I think, fairly obvious examples are, Newton did the laws of motion. Newton did gravity. Newton grasped and passed on to us the basics of gravity and the laws of motion. And then Einstein refined it. Great, and yes, Newton was kind of wrong, but he knew enough that he had, as far as I've heard, he had enough knowledge, enough grasp of gravity and the laws of motion for his explanation of those things to be sufficient to land a person on the moon, to land a projectile on the moon. Basically, this was something that could be done with Newton having completed the basic sweep of how those things work. And similarly, if you look at what Darwin did, he understood enough and presented to us enough about evolution that really you could say, and I think it's really fair to say, that everything about evolution since Darwin has been filling in the details. So that's my thought about that idea, that perhaps the broad sweep of science is done and all we're doing now is filling in details. The other idea of these two parts, ideas that I mentioned earlier, the other idea is that recipes can't really be suppressed. Now, I guess recipes can be suppressed to some extent. We already, on the other hand, already have recipes in play which are used to do some really nasty things. Now, I'm saying nasty because I haven't yet gone into good and evil. So we're just talking here about aesthetically. I think some of the things we're doing with our recipes are nasty. And I expect many of you also, possibly you, the viewer, also think we're doing some nasty things with some recipes we've already got. However, I estimate we're better off developing countermeasures as soon as we can after identifying what the threats would be from new technology. I estimate we're better off doing that than suppressing the new technology for too long. I want to give an example. I have in my head, I have in my brain, in my mind, a recipe for an undifusable bomb. Now, you may not believe that, but that doesn't matter. I do. And nanotech, I estimate, will be able to defuse it. So when nanotech is well developed, there'll be no undifusable bomb. However, what I'd prefer to see the countermeasure first. And yes, it's kind of, you kind of have to do the nanotech because somebody out there is going to come up with that undifusable bomb, and you've got to get the nanotech. We've got to get, the good people have to get the nanotech and be ready with the countermeasure around about the same time that we also develop the undifusable bomb, because how can we complete and refine the countermeasure without developing the technology that we're countering? Can't be done. So, if there's an effective method, and this is my challenge to you, if there's an effective method to suppress technology and still give you a longer life, I challenge you, I want to know. Please, hey, let me know. My estimate, though, is that there is not. Prediction can't be done. This is actually now onto a slightly new idea. Prediction can't be done from certainties because belief is the more faulty approach to knowledge, and skepticism is the less faulty approach to knowledge. We know our facts. This is what we know about our knowledge. We know that our facts are inaccurately measured, and we also know that the nature of existence itself cannot be absolutely proved. We kind of have to take existence on faith. We can possibly get back to that in another presentation. Discuss with me, but this is it. We can't be sure of the nature of existence itself, and we certainly know about our knowledge that it is inaccurate. Now, I say we don't have good reason to doubt that the broad strokes of science have been done. And I say we don't have good reason to doubt that technology that can be developed will eventually be developed, despite whatever suppression we put in place. Eventually, it's going to be there. We will die. That's the other thing we know. We will die. So therefore, I ask you, what reason do you have to not roll the dice on technology which can offer you a really, really long life? And now I just want to quickly say, roll the dice is, of course, an analogy. And I just want to mention, all analogies are false, because one thing is not another. And when you do an analogy, you're likening one thing to another. Two like things which are actually not alike. Now, when you make a life decision, like, yes, I will support the idea of developing nanotechnology, it's not exactly the same as rolling dice. And suppose you had a life decision. You said, yes, I will try what my oncologist recommends as the cure to my cancer, or the correct treatment for my cancer. You really want those dice to be loaded. It's you and your oncologist against the cancer. The cancer is not something you want to play fair with. You want those dice loaded. And so what I'm suggesting about nanotechnology is more like rolling loaded dice. If we're going to give it an analogy, it's, load up those dice, baby. Load them up, and then we're going to roll them. Then they're going to land where we want them to land. So, let me just finish off here with these thoughts. You are like me. I imagine, I guess, it's most likely true that you are like me. You have fun, you laugh, you smile. If you could do the laughing and the smiling and the having fun for an extra 50 years, pain-free, in excellent health, you would, right? You would. I hope you would. I want you to want what I want. I want you to spread this infectious desire to live extra decades, because if enough people talk about this desire and about how nanotech will make it possible, if enough people do that, some people who have the funds to make it happen will make it happen, and then you might just get what you want and what I want. I must get what I want. I hope so. Thank you.